Stories Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. I'm your host, Asher, and our guest today is Melissa and Gregory. And today's theme is around first-time experiences, and we all get to share a bit about some of the first-time experience we've had in the past that have really transformed our life, changed our lives that we want to share with other people so they can see the same value in their own stories. So we're going to start off with Melissa, if you don't mind sharing a bit about you, what you specialize in, where you're hailing from, how you adding value to the world, and who you've been a hero to. And we do the same for Greg. And we get to chat today.
Wonderful. First of all, thanks for having me, Asher. I'm really excited to be here. I'm coming from Kingston, New York, upstate. I'm a depth psychologist and a best-selling author. I usually try to explain depth psychology briefly because when I say it, a lot of people think I'm saying death when I'm saying depth.
Ah,
So depth psychology, we basically are one of the many psychologies that values a hidden part of mind. We call it the unconscious. I work with people to help them tap into this part of themselves that's really difficult to see, to understand. And we do that in a variety of creative ways. One of my favorite ways to work with people is actually through the analysis of dreams and fairy tales. Because we can look at fairy tales and find different narratives and stories that speak to us that can help us to reconcile our past, to deal with trauma, to deal with just different types of circumstances that may not have closure or an ending. So, working with stories and storytelling, fairy tales is one of my favorite ways to help support people. I'm also a hypnotherapist. I've been doing that work for over 20 years as well, which is part of the going into the unconscious, working with the hidden part of the mind, and helping people not be so afraid of the dark. It's one of my favorite things. So I would say do you want me to jump into the first now, or do you want me
oh,
to
we,
wait?
we, can- we can put a pin in that and come back to
Yeah, let's
it.
put it on. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa. We got to talk today because I like we said dreams and fairy tale. Like we get to tell the tale in proper detail today because my interest around some of those things is what you mentioned too. So thank you for sharing. And Greg, if you don't mind telling us where you're hailing from, where you specialize in, how you adding value to the world, and who you being a hero to.
Yeah. I'm honored to be here, Asher. Thank you. Um, my name is Gregory Meadows. I'm a life coach and a parent facilitator. So, what I do is I work with adolescents 12 and up to help reconnect them to their parents. And so, a lot of times, parents will come to me and say, just fix my kid. They're the
Mm,
problem, which we know from family systems work. That's usually not the case. So, I end up working with a lot of parents who have children that are struggling with behavior issues, truancy issues, drug-related issues, and they could have been impacted by abuse, neglect, or trauma. And so I work with them one-on-one in sessions, both virtually and in person. But I also teach a virtual parenting class as well to help parents find empathy again in the midst of a conflict cycle where adolescents and parents can't seem to get on the same page with communication, with values, with boundaries, and things like that. So I really try to reconnect them through the virtual parenting class or individual sessions. And I am calling in from Denver, Colorado today.
all right. My favorite state in the United States is Colorado. So, all right, and interesting. Melissa mentioned Kingston, New York, which Kingston is the capital of my home country, Jamaica, which we kind of have some kind of connection here. So I love this right here. I love this right here. So we're gonna start off with you, Melissa. We're gonna jump into your world. If you want to jump into the space of your first time experience, you want to start with to share with the world. If you had to have a conversation with somebody around your first time experience, which experience would that be that you would share first?
I wrote a list and I was kind of sitting with this because I love this idea of exploring a first. So I'm going to go with the first one that kind of jumped out to me. This is something that I actually felt was a really bizarre, quirky sort of a behavior that I had. And what it was is essentially I was obsessed with other people's basements. And so all I wanted to do was go over people's houses, like my friends or family members. I didn't have a basement. I never had a basement in my life. And so I would start by, going over to a relative's house and going down the steps, and the East Coast basements are very different than lots of other parts of the country. That's like old stone moss, like they were back in the day, very damp and dark. But I wasn't afraid of that. I actually thought it was like a magical, enchanting sort of a thing. And I just wanted to go down the steps and see what was in all these like mysterious places that people had beneath their homes. And I picked this as one of my first because it's something that I initially felt kind of silly about. I thought it was a quirky, strange thing that I almost felt a little bit ashamed, or, people picked on me for it, or thought it was like such a strange part of the personality. And what I discovered through this idea of like wanting to explore basements is it was actually very telling of what my career would become later in life. And when I started to study the unconscious and the different parts of the psyche, and I remember a story one time where we're talking about the building of, let's say, the structure of a house and how it can mirror the psyche, and how the basement is the unconscious hidden part of the home and also of the mind. And after that, when I sort of connected with that idea, I realized that this bizarre thing was actually like an asset to me, or a creative form. And I learned to appreciate it instead of feeling silly, or, like there was something wrong, because I tend to also be drawn to some of the more mysterious and darker parts of life and the personality. And it actually has served me very well to have this quality, this sort of curiosity to want to know like what's in there, what's under there. But that was the first that came to me to share, because it was something that I feel like I was able to transform within my own mind of how I approached it, and how I felt about myself when it came to this sort of unique thing that became a quality that now I appreciate.
Mm. No, that's very powerful and interesting. And when he was, something, one of my big thing is around like I call them spams, like similes, parables, analogies, and metaphors. And oftentimes you can always find ways to kind of compare things in your life to certain things. You're like, oh my God, that's such a good metaphor now for my life. So thinking back to your own journey, the basement itself, and going into that subconscious place of your mind, I love how you framed that, by the way. I really love it. And I was wondering over there on your side of the house, Greg, you was kind of, showing some animation there. I was wondering how did that connect for you when she was talking about her first
Hmm.
time experience?
Yeah, yeah. So I believe that the universe or God, creator, they speak to us in the dialect of our soul. So
Mm,
depending on where we come from, our culture, our family history, um, the universe does speak to us in ways that we will understand. Maybe not right at the beginning, but definitely later on. So like, for example, like maybe if you grew up in a Native American culture, animals
mm,
have a spiritual significance, right? And we might see an eagle, and that eagle represents, transition to a new chapter in our lives and things like that.
mhm,
So I'm not surprised that as a child, uh, that she had a fascination with basements, right? And then she grew into that, and I have my own similar story in my own way too. So.
mm. What are your first? What one are your first that you want to share?
So one of my first, and this is kind of going along kind of a similar line. My very first client was a 15-year-old male whose mom came to me and told me that her son says that he sees ghosts.
Mm,
And she couldn't reconcile. She's like, I don't know whether to believe him. Is it true? Are ghosts real? All that sort of things. And so my job was to help them kind of, well, basically to help mother understand the child, right? Whether
mhm,
it's true or not true, how can how can they be on the same page and things like that? And I met this young man, and for all intents and purposes, and I've been in the field a long time, so I can kind of tell when someone is making things up or embellishing and things like that. And he was the most functional, level-headed 15-year-old who told me, he's like, I literally see ghosts in the middle of my classroom, walking through. I'll see them going down the hall, things like that. And he had been evaluated for, schizoaffective, any sort of hallucinations, and he'd passed all those tests.
Mhm.
And so I ended up helping this family sort of reconnect and understand that, like, he actually may see ghosts.
Mhm.
Um, and so it kind of presented it was a very unique first client that I had in working with adolescents.
Hmm. I think I'm curious a bit now to dig into that part of the story. because
Yeah.
because here's the thing. I've met people that are clairvoyant, people that are just like they have different experiences, and all of us want our experiences of reality to be true. Like all of us want it to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people don't believe us because they don't have that experience, we think, oh, this person is crazy. But actually, they're seeing something else we're not seeing. Like, how are they seeing it? So I'm curious to know, how do you get that person, the parents to connect with the son, or the son to connect with his reality?
Well, it's not rocket science, and maybe it's a little bit nuanced, right?
Mhm.
So regardless of whether it's true or not, this is his perception of reality. And
Mhm.
so honoring that, regardless of whether it's true or not, and also 2 years from now, he may not see ghosts anymore. He may have sort of outgrown it, or may have shifted his experience where he says, I don't really see them anymore, that sort of thing. So really, helping mom connect with him and validate his experience, right?
Mhm.
Um, Speaking specifically around ghosts and things like that, like, we see a very, very small spectrum of light out of the total spectrum, right? And
Yes.
so, and science proves that there's more than 3 dimensions. So it's entirely plausible that most of us just don't see that, and some of us do. And so helping mom understand that whether it's true or not, it's about the relationship, right? It's
Mhm.
about making sure that if he has a fearful experience, or if he needs to talk about something, that she is there for him and she is connected to him in relationship, and that the story doesn't um, circumvent or supersede the relationship in a sense. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. When Melissa was talking earlier, when she was talking about, let's go into Melissa's basement really fast. I was thinking about Home Alone. You know that one scene when he was like scared of the basement. I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
remember that
yeah.
scene. And I was like, oh my God. He's like, okay, it's not so scary anymore. But Melissa, back to your side of the house, inside of your basement right now. What is showing up for you when we listen to Greg share his part of the first time experience?
I love this so much because what I didn't say is one of the things I wrote down deeply connects with what Gregory just shared. The reason I even got into the work that I do is because I had those experiences and nobody believed me. Well, I shouldn't say that. My mother did believe me, but there were a lot of others that didn't believe me. And I had very unique evidence, let's just say, of things that I couldn't explain how I knew them, accurate
Mhm.
information and details, and it scared people. And I'll never forget the feeling of scaring someone from just being myself and what that ripple that can have. And so that is deeply embedded in the work that I do, helping people to feel safe and not to be afraid of things that they don't understand. Because often when we don't understand something, our first instinct is not even necessarily just to like maybe avoid it or to say it's wrong, but even I'll just go as far as to say, like, some will just say it's evil. So
Mhm.
instead of like what the beautiful work that Gregory's doing, helping people, whether it's true or not, to stay in this place of possibility, to validate the perception, that can change someone's life by having that. So I was just absolutely moved by this because I'm like, this synchronicity of how this is unfolding is absolutely beautiful. I went with the safe story, which was the basements instead of the seeing ghosts. So interesting how things just come to surface anyway, right?
Yeah,
When
I
they're
love it.
meant to. So Yeah, I'm so grateful that you chose that experience to share.
No, that's beautiful.
Very cool.
There's a saying that says, "Our five sense perception can only detect what comes and go, just like we can only detect like light and darkness, right? But then
Mhm.
like air that is constantly present, our five sense perception cannot detect it, meaning that we can't see it because it's never leave. It doesn't go anywhere. It's always here. So then it comes back to what you can see because most of our five sense perception is trained to see what comes and goes, right? But that was always present. So I always think about that when people are saying that they're recognizing things. Maybe you got sixth sense that mine just not awakened yet, and I can't believe or disbelieve. You just gotta validate and acknowledge what you're experiencing, and
Yeah.
oftentimes that's what people are really looking for.
Yeah.
Hmm. Any more first time experiences, Greg? Let's see if you pull off something off Gregory. Let's see if you pull some of Melissa's list. I'm gonna see how much synchronicities happen today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I have the
let's
list. I'm serious.
okay. No, I have a term. I say I have psychic Tourette's. So sometimes I will bring up or mention things that I don't consciously know, but relate to the other person and things like that. So I think that was an example of how I pulled something like, that was relevant, but I
Mhm.
didn't know that it was relevant to Melissa.
Mhm.
So I would say that another first for me, in working with hundreds of children over my career from ages 4 to 22, I was working with one young man, and it was time for him to learn how to ride a bike. And he had a single mom family, no father in the picture, and so like just the process of helping him learn how to ride a bike was a very fatherly experience for me to see him like pedal. Now he's balancing, now he's got it. And I was just like, it was a very touching moment for me
Mhm.
to be witness to something that he will be able to do for the rest of his life. And I was there at this pivotal moment. It kind of like, I was a guide along the way. So I just happened to be there for that time, and I helped him learn how to ride a bike. And that was just a really like touching, moving experience for me. That sometimes I get to be a surrogate parent to
Mhm.
children, or I help bridge the gap between their parents and them. And so that's an example of just how like just a wonderful example of how I got to be kind of like a dad for this kid who didn't have a dad.
Hmm. I'm curious, Gregory, why is the work you're doing in your specialty so important for you right now?
Um, I truly believe that we could change the planet in one generation if we got parents on board, because children have not been beat down by the world. They still have imagination. They still ask questions when adults don't ask as many questions because they already accept the no. And so, if I can help parents steward their children into their greatness, the children already want to change the world. They already are looking at all the things we're doing or not doing to not make it better. And so they're asking questions, they're being bold, they're using their imagination to invent things or to talk about topics. And so the work I do is contributing to helping this planet change
Mhm.
itself holistically for the better. And I believe that we can do that in one generation if we just get out of the way as adults.
Mm. That was powerful, by the way, Gregory. That was really deep. And it brought me back to something Melissa said earlier. She talks about dreams and fairy tale and how she used that system or that construct to really create the right kind of context for people to kind of filter their story into or their content into. So Melissa, going back to dreams and a fairy tale, I'm curious about your side of the house when it comes to that one. Why you share that early in your opening?
Sure. Sure. There's so many different reasons, but one that just kind of jumps out at me is even just the idea of a nightmare. And, dreams are fun. We have the literal dream when it comes to the waking state where we want to create something in the world or do something, and it's often charged with this wonderful, powerful energy. And then we have dreams that occur during our sleeping state, while we're deep at rest, and we have these images and metaphors and things that are unfolding through the psyche, through the soul, and it's interesting because nightmares are sometimes sort of categorized as negative or bad because they're intense, because they are often filled with images, movement, feeling, sensation, that we haven't yet learned how to break it down or understand. Not understanding necessarily with just the mind either, but with the whole self, like with an embodied somatic type of experience, which is very body based. And so what I've learned with just the nightmare dream side of things is that often we're being chased, we're being hunted, we're running from something. And sometimes if we just stop and let ourselves be chased by whatever it is that's coming after us, it might actually be another type of dream that turns on its head. I've worked with people who have had nightmares only to think starting out that it was that it was going to be a trauma or something else that was trying to catch up with them. And of course, absolutely, that is possible. And that is something that happens. And sometimes it's a neglected dream from the waking state that they're not giving enough attention to, a desire of their heart that's saying, when are you going to pay attention to me? And through this dream state, it can take on this ugly form, this giant monstrous thing to get our attention, because during the day while we're awake, many of us are overwhelmed. We're running around, we're consumed, we're inundated with media, with life, with things happening, that we aren't necessarily paying attention to the subtlety of intuition, of instinct, of our deeper desires and dreams. And so they will show up in a way where it can reach us, and that might just present as a nightmare. So even just something as complicated and simple as that, to think about a nightmare being something unexpressed that wants to emerge from the depth of the mind to reach consciousness, which is basically when our ego, the part of the psyche, lets us kind of see something or understand it. That's when we have like an aha moment or an insight. And I've seen fairy tales, dreams, nightmares produce these types of things when the individual, the client, the student has a willingness or an open heart to see it. So there's just something really beautiful about even working with resistance and softening our resistance toward ideas, things that we label as positive or negative, dark or light, and kind of becoming more curious. So for me, all of this kind of comes back to wonder, keeping the imagination alive and allowing that to be a really giving it more space in our lives than we currently do when we're busy and distracted. And, just a lot of us are just trying to get through the day. It's like, who has time for wonder? Yet wonder and imagination can actually provide insight, tools, solutions. So it's just a whole other world that I'm really passionate about. And I've seen it work for people in a way where it almost looks like miraculous, when really they just stopped running from the nightmare or turned and faced the thing that they were too afraid to look at. And I just think it's the most beautiful thing to witness.
Hmm. You're speaking to the child in me right now. And you mentioned to stop running for the nightmare. So I'm gonna share a story with you. So most of my life, I've run away from the snakes in my dream. Like since I was a kid, snakes always been following me around in my dream, like sometime every night, and it felt like a nightmare because I'm scared of snake. I mean, I used to watch them on the TV, just kind of because I'm fascinated by snakes too. But then they're always in my dreams. So and it's scary sometimes. So what I ended up in my adult life, I was just having, because I was tying snakes. Plus, then I was in the military, so I had a lot of nightmares for a while, right? So for me to really kind of shut that off, I went into what I call like sleep deprivation, sleep exhaustion. So I used to overhydrate myself before I go to sleep at night. And I would only stay down for like 3, 4 hours and I'm up again. But that becomes a habit over time because I'm running from the snake. So he was talking about the person that is running from certain things. And I was talking to a couple of friends recently and was like, Asher, time for you to face the snake in your dreams.
Mm.
And then I'm like, okay, maybe it's time I'm gonna see what this really mean. We talking about like, similes, parables, analogy, and metaphor. Metaphorically, I don't know what this really means, but I'm looking into it now because I'm realizing that, something else happening in my dream that I need to face. Or those things that feel like nightmares. So, but thank you for getting in the basement a little bit there, Melissa. I felt you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank
What other
you. I
first do you have on your list?
I'm
What other
sorry.
first? Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh no, just I was saying I have a lot of snake dreams too.
Oh, you
And
do?
yeah, and I used to be afraid of them until I realized that for me, because they're all different, all our dreams, our images are all different, even if there is a connecting sort of energy or symbolism, that it can be very unique to you and what you're experiencing. But for me, it was a signal that there was something going on in my instincts, in my instinctual life that needed for me to tend to it. So it might be an intuition I wasn't listening to, a pattern that I saw kind of reemerging in my life, but maybe wasn't really paying enough attention to it. But anytime a snake appears in my dream now that I've done so much work on it, it's now more of a support to say, hey, the situation that you're in right now, just look closely. That doesn't mean there has to be danger or anything crazy, but maybe there's a detail there that I glossed over. And so when it shows up, I look closely at my life, what's happening. And if it's a contract I'm signing or a conversation I have to have that's difficult, I become more mindful. And that changed everything. So
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see if you focus on the snakes, do some free writing on it just to see what kind of comes out and see if there's any patterns that are associated with it for you.
Thank you so much. Patterns. I know. I was thinking deeply. I'm starting to see there's value in the symbolism and sometimes the real deep things in the basement I need to focus on. Thank you. What else on your list, Melissa?
Oh, my list. Let's see.
Let's pick one more off of it. One more first time experience.
One more. Um, you know, this speaks to intuition and a lot of the things that we've kind of all been sharing, listening to intuition and the different ways that can manifest and appear for us. And I remember one of my first intuitive experiences that saved my life. And it absolutely it opened a door. It did something for me that really got me thinking that there was something else beyond what I could see that was either had my back, was working through me, however, you wouldn't want to word that or understand that. But essentially, the short version is I was in a vehicle with a few people who were probably just as tormented as I was at the time during this really difficult period of my life. We were all involved in a lot of just heavy stuff, drugs, and just living a really, really frightening lifestyle at that time, I'll just say. And we were driving and we had gone to someone's house. And while we were at this house, I was chatting with this one of the people that was there. And I had this feeling, this overwhelming feeling, nothing else with it. No image, no knowing, no story. I couldn't piece it together. I just had a feeling and it felt like my body was trying to get my mind's attention. So I'd never had it like that before. And it almost felt like my nervous system was sort of like on fire. It was very strange, very electric. And I couldn't ignore it. So I kept paying attention to that. We get back in the car to leave, and they want to take a trip to the city. And I'm like, bring me home, drop me off. I wasn't that kind of person. I was a people pleaser. I was very much, I didn't use my voice. I didn't know how to speak up. I didn't know how to stand in my power. I hadn't learned any of those lessons yet. So for me to say, no, bring me home, it was almost as if, I just did a 180 in my personality. So, of course, when I started to say that, the driver was like, no, you're fine, just come with, and tried to talk me out of getting out of the car. And this feeling kept building and building and building. And finally, I just lied and said, I feel like I'm going to get sick. I don't feel well. Please just bring me home. They drop me off. They leave. About a week later, I have a police officer at my door wanting to ask questions. And I come to find out that where we were with the house that we had stopped at, apparently there were weapons and they were stolen. And then what was happening is those individuals were taking them to sell them for drugs. I had no idea any of this was going on. I had no idea that I was sort of almost being used in a strange way to be a distraction. I had no clue at all, except for this feeling that I couldn't explain, because they were extremely manipulative and good at, their game and what they were doing. I was very naive. I think I was about 17 years old. And so intuition, instinct, following your gut, like I didn't really know the depth of those kind of experiences. And out of the four of us that were in that car, two of them passed before we were even 25 years of age. And so it opened my eyes to whatever this feeling is, and trusting that something has my back. And I learned then from that point on how to cultivate that part of me, how to listen to that part of me, how to really train myself to, as much as I could, to draw that out more and more, and help others also trust themselves in that way, especially like we're all talking about here, when you can't see something, when you don't know why, when you don't have this perfectly laid out plan that's telling you why you should listen to this thing you can't see. And yet I have no doubt that it saved me from who knows what kind of turmoil. And it's not the only time, and it's only gotten more intense. And now when I listen to it, though, it also has beautiful, amazing, a lot like synchronistic qualities. So it isn't just about the scary, frightening, protective experiences, although that's a part of it, but it's also the same part of me that I feel has also opened doors for me in my life and my career, my relationships. But that first, I can tap right back into that fear in an instant. It was so visceral. And I think that was necessary because, to be honest, I might not have listened if I didn't have that much of a physical reaction to the situation.
That's incredible. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Melissa. Gregory, you listen to Melissa's storyline just now. I'm curious to know what shows up in your thought universe just now, or in your system.
I feel like Melissa and I should talk offline because we're both in the sort of intuitive helping field and things like that, and kind of can see the deeper layers and the subtext, right? Like snakes and basements and all sorts of symbolism or messages and things like that. But yeah, I've had those experiences myself, just where I kind of just knew something unexplainable, things like that. I just happened to be at a doctor's office when I was a kid, and this was in the middle of summer in the South. So we're talking like 80% humidity. It's 90 degrees. And a mom accidentally locked her child in the car. I was like 10 or 11, skinny as a rail still. And then went out there, and a man, like I just stood there for a second and I was watching all this happen. And then all of a sudden I just knew that I could stick my hand down in the little crack of the window and unlock the car. And I like walked up, and the guy was like, the man like pulled on the window hard enough, and I slipped my little skinny arm down in there and unlocked the door and saved the kid, and just went back in and like was like, oh, I did something cool. Okay. So just little things like that about being in the right place at the right time. And I really don't believe in accidents. I think the universe is divinely organized, even to such a high degree that we can't even perceive and conceive of all how divinely intricate it is. And so I really resonate with Melissa's story.
Wow, that was powerful. Thank you both for really syncing up today and really kind of extending this energy. We just really think, I say we think further on the road just now on whatever we thought we was going to talk about today. So I appreciate you guys popping in here. And we're going to wrap up a bit. And I got to ask a couple questions before we kind of close out. So Greg, if somebody hear your story right now and just really felt connected to you and would love to work with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, they can email me at gregory@walkingmeadows.com. I'm on Facebook, Walking Meadows, and Instagram, so they can reach out to me through either any of those mediums.
Same question for you, Melissa. They heard you today and they felt you deeply as well. And were like, okay, how can I work with Melissa? How can they work with you?
Sure. You can email me, melissa@melissacorter.com. You can also visit my website, melissacorter.com, and same Facebook, Instagram, melissakimcorter.com, or yeah, Melissa Kim Corter for any of those as well.
Oh, powerful. And other questions. So what is your biggest takeaway from this conversation today, Melissa?
Oh, just, listening to you both share and then having the opportunity to share with you. It's just the affirmation for me that, like, just Gregory just shared it. We're deeply connected. There's so much happening. I really do believe in this greater organizing principle as well, whatever that is, right? However we want to call that or label that. And there's just something so incredible about the alignment of things when they come together. And my favorite thing about this is that sense of awe. It's like, I love that no matter how much work we do and how much you read about these things or how many of these incredible experiences you have, that still happens, that we can still feel awe over something. I love that. And I don't ever want to stop feeling that sense of wonder and awe when things align and there's evidence like this, people coming together and sharing their stories and their work. And I just feel honored and very grateful to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you. Same question for you, Gregory. What is your biggest takeaway?
I believe in the power of synchronicity. And I feel that the universe nudges us exactly where we need to be. We are watching the podcast that we're meant to watch. We're, looking at the Instagram account that we're supposed to. And so I believe that if we honor those little nudges, we will make the next right step. And so that's my big takeaway from today's podcast.
Perfect. And last closing question for both of you. What is that one thing or two thing when people do drive you crazy? I'm gonna start with you, Greg, if you don't mind sharing. What is that one thing or two thing when people do drive you crazy?
What is the one or two things that drive me crazy? I think I am challenged when parents think that they don't have an impact on their children. And they don't see the impact on them. So that's what I would say. That's challenging for me.
What about you, Melissa? One thing or two thing when people do drive you crazy?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is just wanting to kind of skate on the surface of things. It's I have a really hard time talking like just about the weather or or I mean it's great, it's fine, it's just I really love having deeper conversations like we've had here today. So I struggle a little bit when I sense either myself or someone else just slipping into that kind of safety of like, let's keep it light or let's keep it easy. And there's a part of me that's like, no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, it's a little bit of a thing, I think.
Anything else?
I struggle a little with closed-mindedness. Which is, I think it's a similar, probably the other side of the coin with that. But like Gregory said, and Asher, you've said it too, there's just so much we don't know, we can't see. And the idea that we're limited by just what our eyes can see, there's something about that just sort of feels very constricting. Yeah, and I feel like there's so much magic in the expansion of things. So yeah, those two I think are my top two.
Wow. Well, I have to say this was a very, very deep conversation, had a lot of depth, had a lot of really good content today. I appreciate you guys sharing your story, sharing your journey. Really, really felt you today. And for the folks that are listening, you just had an incredible conversation with Melissa and Gregory about their own story, their own journey, how they see the world, how they're adding value to the world, who they've been a hero to. Could be somebody just like you if you're listening and want to connect. So I appreciate everyone for listening. And with that, tune into Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. And with that, make it an awesome day.